Hi, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to get into a conversation about the gold-backed standard. And here's why I want to get into this because there's so much confusion going on around here. And it sounds like a song, isn't it? Okay. Now, why I get into this is there's so much misunderstanding. It's like people have a part of a message. If you've ever been around a circle and if you've ever been in a youth group and they start with maybe 20 people in a group and they all whisper the message. By the end of the 20 people, you go, wait, that's not what the message was. You know, the first person to the 20th person, that isn't ever what the message is, right? And you go, yeah, it isn't what the message is, right? And here's what happens. Whether or not they were listening to me or they were listening to someone else on this message, I mentioned this. It's motivation. So someone comes to this point, and I'm gonna start with this point. What is the person's motivation for why they're speaking this? Number one, I never have I don't have any motivation to why I'm talking about a gold standard. You know why? Because I'm not trying to sell you any gold. Did you know that? So I don't have any motive. Listen, I want the country to be healthy again. And I will talk about what it means to have a gold back standard in a while. But my motivation is for the country and frankly the world to be on an asset backed standard. But I don't get anything personally other than, yes, I mean, my life is better personally. But if you do something about a gold back standard, it doesn't help me personally. Okay. So when I'm talking to you about this, you're not going to help my life better by being on a gold back standard. Okay. So that's why I want you to listen to me. But when other people bring this up, they're talking about a gold back standard and they have an they have an ulterior motive, right? Sorry, I cannot say that today. Holy cow, I just cannot bring it up. Okay, that's what's going on. I've been having a major headache after a chelation therapy, trying to get rid of some of the heavy metals in my body. So boy, I've been really going through it. But I want you to listen to a video. We're going to show you two different videos, and I've been interlacing these videos because I can't get the volume any louder than they already are. So I've been putting the closed caption on here so that, you know, forgive me, I've been trying to come up with the best ways to get the videos loud enough, and there's no louder than they can be. So I put the closed caption on there, so at least you can hear them. Listen to this one. These are two different economists that have different ways of thinking about it. They don't believe in a gold-backed currency. Neither one of these types of economists in these videos believe in a gold-backed currency. That's number one to think about here, okay? So listen to this guy.
It used to be the case that the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. And the U.S. government said, if you don't like these pieces of paper, we'll give you gold. And ultimately, we ended that. We're never going to go back to that, presumably, right?
Probably, presumably, that's right. But not if you watch these these cycles, that because you have the devaluation, then people.
Wait a second. Listen to what he says. If you, and I'm going to back this up just a hair, okay?
Not if you watch these these cycles, that because you have the devaluation, then people don't have confidence in the fiat system over a period of time. And through history, they've, at that point, the way that works is you print all this money, then you pay the debt with the cheap money, but nobody wants to hold it, so then they go back and link it again. It is conceivable that you can see a relinking of gold to money, but that's way in the future.
Right.
It's kind of like, let me put it another way. He said, he's almost saying it, if you listen to it, and I've listened to this guy several times here, listen when I've been messing around with this video, and it's kind of like, when your father comes home, I think maybe, well, probably he's gonna spank your bottom well, I don't know for sure. He probably was gonna. Well, I don't know for sure, but yeah, he's probably gonna spank you. And the kid's going, is he gonna spank me or is he not? I don't know. Right? And you going, is it really gonna go back on a go back standard? See, this guy doesn't believe in a go back standard, but he doesn't know for sure. And the reality is, there's all this conversation about a go back standard, but he knows that you can't stay in a fiat currency. What does a fiat currency mean? A fiat currency is a situation where all you have is a debt economy. See, what happens in a debt economy is that it's just paper. Okay, so I just want you to think about pieces of paper. So I just keep printing off more and more paper. So I can just keep going through more paper. So I can just go to my printer and just print off more paper. And then if everyone accepts that those pieces of paper have meaning, I can then say, well, if you like this piece of paper and you think that there's meaning in that paper, then it's worth something. And then everyone trades for that piece of paper. And if we change it out to this has meaning, well, then that has meaning. And so we'll trade for this thing. Oh, but if that doesn't have meaning, well, then we'll trade, sorry, hitting my monitor, then we'll trade for this thing. Well, that has meaning. You see, what we're talking about is an exchange of value. So if we start doing these things, have an exchange of value, that is what is currency. Currency is an exchange of value that two parties actually have an exchange of value. Okay, that's all it is. So when we say a fiat currency is two parties have a set of currencies that we just say, you know what, the whole system believes in those currencies, and some overarching body goes, you know what, I believe in it, you guys should all believe in it too. And if the systems finally goes, you know what, I don't believe in it anymore because it just doesn't work, and something outside of the systems finally says it just doesn't work, then we have to either exchange from one currency to another, or fake the system out enough, or we have to go because the systems aren't working. So what we do is that we go into a debt. So here's what happens. In the past, what they have done is that they switched it out. So what happens is that this situation that happens for you and I, we go through something called bankruptcy. So when we get to the end of our cycles of debt, we go through bankruptcy, and so we trade out all of our debt, and we can survive through bankruptcy. And that's what happens to us. Well, it happens to the systems too, but we have never really recognized those. And that's what I've been talking to you guys about. 1913, they created the debt cycle, and it had to have an ending cycle. That first ending cycle was 1933, when they actually moved out of the first cycle, which was the very first time frame where they moved out of the actual gold standard. The first gold standard of 1933, where they moved away from the gold standard. In 1944, they created the Bretton Woods Conference, where they said, you know what, we're going to say the American dollar was primacy for the world. But in 1971, Nixon took us off of the international gold standard and free floated the dollar, and it just went to ungodly standards. By the 1980s, it was up at $68 instead of $35. And it was like crazy numbers. And so we had inflation floating up at way nutty levels. Now I had a real estate, actually, my building that I'm in that I rent from for my business. Let me tell you, the building is trying to sell for 1.6 million. And the building owner was trying to talk to me about our building. And he was like, in the 1980s, interest rates were, 18%. And I'm like, and you're trying to explain that interest rates are the same as they are today. And I was like, are not as bad as they were in the 80s. Yeah. Do you want to know what the cost was of this same building in the 1980s, which this building was built in the 1980s? This building would have been around $80,000 in the 1980s. So at 18% interest in the 1980s at $80,000 isn't the same circumstance as a 7% loan at $1.6 million. He was giving me a kind of a screwed up look. You could hear it all over the phone. Anyway, my point is that when we have a broken system of inflation, because that's what happens when we have this situation. Now, so 1971, the system was going completely bonkers because they were in a bankruptcy setup. What they did is they switched out the systems, just what happens in fiat. The next broken system happens in around 2000. The next system of brokenness occurred in 2020, and it free floated all the way, and it should have changed out in 2020, but it free floated again, and they were in a broken nature. And we should have gone through another changeover. And see, it's always screwed the person, the citizen out, but it didn't. And you go, yeah, well, it should still screw over the person. Okay, I want you to see this guy talking, because this guy's actually a really good guy. There's nothing wrong with this guy, but he doesn't fully understand everything. But I do want you to see some of the confusion that keeps going on, because here's one of the theories that people do not understand. And I'm going to leave this on the bottom of the screen as he's talking, because it's part of the theory that keeps coming up. Okay, so watch this.
Imminent. Is it something that is going to happen at any moment we have to be prepared for, or is it greatly exaggerated, or is there some truth in the middle? And ultimately, what should we watch? And more importantly, what should we do? Okay, they've been trying to do this for well over a decade, and they still haven't figured that out. We know that the BRICS nations, you hear about it all the time. Some of my friends in the industry, in the gold space, are constantly telling you that the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and all the other states that have joined, they're gonna start their own currency. It's gonna be a gold-backed currency. It's gonna be something like that. You see it all over YouTube, the news, etc. How would a new BRICS currency affect the US dollar? As a matter of fact, Donald Trump, when he was coming back in for his second term, he saw news, he saw chatter about the BRICS doing their own currency, and he said, hey, if you launch your own currency, then 100% tariffs against you. Record amounts of gold. So we can see in the chart right here that we can go back all the way here.
By the way, I'm cutting him up here, so understand he's doing this
here to 2014 right here. And you can see that the amount of gold buying has gone up. And so for the last several years, a lot of gold buying.
So I want you to understand, there has been a ton of gold buying from 2014 on. What were the central bankings of the world knowing that we don't know at that time frame? See, I've been learning about this Nasara piece that I really didn't understand. I've been hearing about this situation, but I didn't know the word Nasara until around 2020. But I'd been hearing about this situation since 2010. But the world has actually understood a very small number of people. But he's talking about it here, that China and many other, China was the first one that was really doing something kind of crazy about it. But the governments were starting to buy gold much more in this time frame.
Been happening. So they're buying more gold, and it's no wonder. China and Russia has been trying to get off the dollar for a long time. Thing imminent or exaggerated? Well, to understand this, we have to look at a couple of things. So number one, we have to understand that currencies exchange, foreign currencies, FX exchange, and how they adjust. And we're going to look through 3 periods in time so you can understand this. But first of all, liquidity imbalances adjust. So depending on how much money, credit.
So here's what he's talking about here. Currencies exchange because, for instance, the euro versus the dollar versus the pound versus, any other, the lira, any other kind of currencies. The only way that they should ever, the only reason why they ever have changed in value is because of fiat currencies when they've unhooked themselves from a hard asset. In the past, they never adjusted. I mean, before 1913, they never adjusted. They were very, very stable to one another with that too. But also, we didn't have, international natures of currencies. Now, when we go backward in time, they will be very stable to one another. And that's actually what Trump is doing with the tariffs. He's actually balancing them. And we're going to see a huge balance. Okay. So I've talked about that a little bit more, and I'll talk a lot more about that in the future.
Available, you have liquid. It adjusts the real exchange rates. So what the exchange rates are between the 2 different currencies. Understand how this works. So first of all, I don't have this phase. We'll go back to 1944. This is the Bretton Woods Agreement. The world, pretty much the entire world, got together and agreed that the United States dollar would be the reserve currency of the world. It would be backed by gold. $35 would equal 1 ounce of gold. And the currencies of the world would peg to the US dollar. That was the Bretton Woods Agreement. It was still a semi-quasi gold-backed system because the dollar was backed by gold. Currencies were backed by the dollar. We're going to jump ahead to 1971. And the reason why this is a post-Bretton Woods Agreement, this is now fiat. So we're off of the gold standard. 1971, Richard Nixon, thank you very much, removed the United States, I say that sarcastically, removed the United States off of the gold system, the gold standard, and now we have just free-floating fiat currencies. And this period is from 1971 to 1990. So post-Bretton Woods, we've ended that system. Now, when Nixon did that, ripped the dollar off the gold system, all the other currencies of the world got taken off the gold system, right? So everything's free floating. 1990, we're into phase 2, 1998 to 2009. 1998 was a very pivotal year, 1999 and 2000, right around the dot-com boom. So we had 2 things, the productivity gains of the dot-com boom.
Do you notice the time frames that he's using are very similar to mine, but I want you to understand this 2009 time frame. This is right around the same time frame that I've talked to you about some other areas. This time frame is when we had our really heavy devaluation. This is when we had the sickness of the system, when we had the Great Recession. But what I talk about this is when the cabal stole $83 trillion. This is when the GDP, the gross domestic product, went into free fall for the world. And when they started to steal money blind of the people. So the debt crisis started to go into ugly land. And this is around the Obama timeframe on purpose with that too. Oops.
But it's also when China was admitted into the WTO. That's the World Trade Organization. So it took them from a bunch of rice farmers to now making most of the world's factories, right? They make most of the world's goods through their factories. And so China was entered into the WTO, and that started to offset Japan's decline. So all of that money started going over into Asia, right? Offshoring, America started offshoring all of its manufacturing. Global private debt started to rise from 117% to 138% of global GDP. That's a massive increase. That's a percentage. The amount of debt to the amount of production. So debt was rising faster than production. And low policy rates, keeping interest rates low, fueled this debt expansion. Because remember, when debt is cheap.
So one of the things that happens in debt was, when we had debt rates sitting at 0 to 1 to 2%, people would go, well, it's okay to have debt. Well, of course it's okay to have debt when it costs almost nothing to have debt, and that's how you utilize, that's how you grow things in that way. And yet that's a sick way of handling it. That's how fiat currencies work. That's what a debt economy does. But there is an end to debt when it becomes so high, when the systems can't handle it. I was talking to people. I actually got fired from an investment firm in 2021 because I was saying, Japan is running at 200% debt to income rate. They were over at 200, 210%. And guess what? Now Japan is so ugly in their circumstance, they're dying. They can't subsume any more debt because the interest rates are killing them.
People use more of it. When debt is expensive, people use less of it. And so that was phase 2. We saw that happening. And then we went into phase 3, which is from 2009 to 2025, which brings us to current time. Now, you probably remember that we've had 2 major disasters in that time period. We saw public debt and monetary inflation from this entire period. We had first the great financial crash, 2008, not just in America, the great financial crash, the global financial crash. And so all the central banks of the world had to just basically print unlimited amounts of quantitative easing, print money, if you will, give it to the banks. And then we had COVID, 2020, right? And again, we had to print trillions and trillions, tens of trillions of dollars and pump it into the system, pumping up the debt. World public debt exploded during those 2 phases, went from 60% to 104% of GDP, almost doubling the amount.
So when debt goes this kind of level, and this happens to us in a personal level, but when it happens to us in a public setting, how long do you go before you can't afford the debt? This is what happens in the world. And this is why I say debt is just as much of a problem as the systems of when we talk about gold-backed currency. Debt in the gold-backed currency are like sitting and they're kissing cousins in this way. They are sitting together in the theater. That sounds gross, doesn't it?
Amount of debt was growing faster than the productivity of the world by almost double the rate during that period. Now, because of that, the US disrupted the 2016 Shanghai Accords. What was happening is the dollar was getting weaker, and Asian currencies were getting stronger, and it was starting to mess up the equilibrium of the world, and they had to intervene. There was what's called the Shanghai Accord. You might recognize that because we've been talking about the Mar-a-Lago Accords, which is where Trump again took office in the second term, and we've been walking through that. And that the Mar-a-Lago Accords are sort of modeled off of the Shanghai Accord from 2016, when the whole world, or maybe the top 5 countries, agreed to strengthen the dollar and weaken the Asian currencies, weaken the yen. What this did, though, is it forced China to also follow suit, and they had to weaken their currency. Is the dollar dying? Tell me the answer, Mark. Well, yes and no. It's dying and it's not dying. What do I mean by that? Against other fiat currencies, no, it's not dying. The dollar looks like it is not going anywhere anytime soon. However, we call it the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry. It doesn't mean it's good, it just means that all the other currencies are much worse, and they're all going to eventually die before the dollar. However, at the same time, it is dying, yes, against real assets. Yes, so it is continuing to lose value when you price it against real things.
Okay, so here's what we're saying. So number 1, we talk about the first theory that is out there in the conversation. Number 1, theory 1, dollar is okay. This is the theory that people are working from. Number 1, dollar is okay. Gold will continue to grow in the price. And so, as if they're like 2 separate entities. And people are sitting there looking at this, and I go, that's not correct. Okay. And this is how people who are MAGA people are saying this. And I'm like, that isn't how it's working. And because here's what happens. If the dollar is okay, but gold continues to grow in price, like it's 2,000, and then it's it's 3,000, and then $3,300. I mean $3,300 an ounce, and then $4,000 an ounce. Here's what happens when the dollar will weaken no matter what happens. And then what happens is that inflation will continue to drop, which means that it's worse for the dollar no matter what we do, which will increase inflation no matter what happens. That's bad for Trump. And so you're going, wait a second, that's not what Trump is saying. Hold on. Okay. Theory number 2. The dollar will die and gold will replace it. So the world will be in chaos. I've heard this one. While we'll go around and let's just say this is gold, and we'll be having to walk into Walmart and buy with gold, and they'll take gold. And I'm like, okay, Walmart's never going to take gold. Like I'm going to have to pay with gold. Like, okay, go ahead and try to pay with gold. Come on, guys. No one is going to pay with a gold bar or gold strip. Does that make any sense? So people who are saying this one here, it seems reasonable, right? That one actually seems a little bit reasonable. But when you understand that inflation will continue to rise and the dollar will lower no matter what, because gold is rising, and it is, no, but that is actually happening. This one makes so little sense. Sorry, my ear is itching. This one makes no sense because no one's going to walk around with physical gold and kind of go, can you put this into your little reader? Or who's going to take it? Like, who's going to give you gold? I mean, give you money, or give you goods in exchange for the gold piece? Here's the reality of what's happening. The US dollar is going to be replaced by a gold-backed US Treasury note in a 1-to-1 basis. You're not going to lose anything, okay? I'm trying to make it reasonable so you understand what's going on here. So what happens to my money? You don't lose anything. So if you have money in the bank, you have $100 in the bank, it still is $100, but it's just US note. So I don't have to do anything. It doesn't matter what bank account. You don't have to pull it out. But if you did pull it out, you're going to have to go back to the bank and get US Treasury notes. Just what you would have to do. Because here's what happens. This doesn't work for the economy. This will die. This is the most unreasonable situation. Here's what happens. This one here, whoever made this one up, I'm going, guys, whoever made that one up had a motivation. Can I tell you what the motivation for this one was? They wanted you to buy their gold on their channel. This one here was just someone who didn't understand the economic realities of the situation. Let me go backward to the first video. I'm going to leave this on the screen, and I want you to watch the first video with this theory.
It used to be the case that the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. And the U.S. government said, if you don't like these pieces of paper, we'll give you gold. And ultimately, we ended that. We're never
Not
going to
this
go
guy.
back to that, presumably, right?
Probably, presumably, that's right. But not if you watch these these cycles, that because you have the devaluation, then people don't have confidence in the fiat system over a period of time. And through history, they've at that point, the way that works is you print all this money, then you pay the debt with the cheap money, but nobody wants to hold it, so then they go back and link it again. It is conceivable that you can see a relinking of gold to money, but that's way in the future.
Right.
See, this guy doesn't get it. It's way in the future. What do you mean it's way in the future? This is a guy who needs to retire, okay? First off, the first dude needs to ask someone else who knows a little bit more about economics. This guy is so old school. We need to tell him shut up and go sit down in the corner. Do you see what I'm saying? The reality is asking the wrong person the wrong question, well, the right question to the wrong person. Do you see what I'm saying here? Because the reality is this sucker is the right answer to the question, but this is the wrong guy answering the question. And this is why when we come to these kinds of things, we get the wrong people answering the questions, because sometimes we get these kinds of answers here, and we're going, I'm so confused. I hope I helped you to answer the questions, because this is the right answer to the question. You guys, be calm. It's going to happen, because you know why you're getting this answer to the question here? It's because it's not time for the answer of the question from Trump. Trump's going, we're not going to mess with the dollar. You know why he's saying that? Because he's saying the US is not going down. Be okay with this, because this one here is saying the US is not going down. You are going to be okay. Just wait for things to happen. Thanks so much.